Broad match keywords can either skyrocket your results or drain your budget. And in today's video, we'll walk you through how broad match keywords work and the different scenarios that they do and do not work in depending on your own specific situation. Now, firstly, just to say what they are, broad match keywords, as defined by Google themselves, say that ads may show on searches that relate to your keyword. So this is just their way of saying that, anything that can be remotely related to the keyword that you're targeting, then we can show your ads for any searches that, we can somewhat relate to this keyword. Now, this differs a lot to phrase match and exact match, especially because for exact match, for example, your ads can still show for searches that are different to the keyword itself, but the searches that your ads appear for have to mean the exact same thing as the keywords. So the matching is a lot tighter. And with phrase match, you might still get some irrelevant search terms, but the searches would still have to somewhat include the meaning of your keyword. So it doesn't fully mean the exact same as a search like an exact match, but the search would have to include the meaning of your keyword. Whereas with broad match, for example, we've noticed Google to get a lot more lenient with the kinds of searches that our ads can be shown for, and can be shown for absolutely anything that could be remotely related in any way, shape, or form to the keywords that you're actually targeting. And you can see here as well with broad match benefits that they say themselves you can reach additional relevant search terms compared to phrase and exact match, which is true in terms of, getting you a lot more impressions. And you could find additional new keyword ideas from getting a lot more impressions than you would have just from phrase and exact match. But the issue with this is that you also get a lot of irrelevant search terms that you might wonder, how is this possibly even related to the keyword that I'm targeting at all? And I just wanted to give you an example of a campaign where we actually implemented some broad match, just to give you an idea of, a scenario that it actually would make sense to add it in first of all. Now, in this campaign, what we've done is actually added in one broad match keyword into every ad group. And what we would say as well, because of how lenient broad match is, that it picks up on so many variants of your searches that you'd never need to add in more than one broad match keyword per ad group. So if you are ever adding in broad match keywords, it's worth taking note of that first of all, that you're not going to need to have multiple broad match keywords in the one ad group, because that one broad match keyword is going to cover so many searches anyways. And you can also see for this campaign, for example, that we're actually using a lot of phrase match keywords, but in general, we'd recommend working with mostly exact match keywords in the beginning, especially for lead gen, but are only using phrase match in this case because it's a much older campaign when, phrase match was actually a lot stricter than it is now, as all of the match types have gotten quite a lot more lenient lately. But the reason why we'd say that adding in a broad match keyword can be beneficial at this point is because we're running a campaign that, has a lot of conversion data. This campaign has about 240 conversions, and we're using smart bidding, meaning that we're running maximized conversions and have a clear target CPA set as well. So that's a point worth mentioning as well, that if you're at a point where you have a lot of conversion data and you're getting consistent leads for a specific amount and you have a clear target CPA set on what you want to pay per lead, then that is a scenario where adding in a broad match keyword to each ad group, for example, would be a good idea, because you've given Google's AI a lot of conversion data at this point. And what broad match can actually do really effectively is amplify the data that you've given Google's AI. But if you have a campaign that does not have a lot of conversion data and Google's AI does not have a lot of context, then using broad match can absolutely have the opposite effect and be detrimental to your campaign. Because as I said, using broad match is only going to amplify the data that's already there. And if there's no good data there to work off of, then broad match is most likely just going to lead to, a lot of wasted clicks for the most part and, no conversions to show for it. But broad match can actually be a good scaling strategy for an aged campaign that has a lot of conversion data and you have a clear target CPA in mind or set, and you're trying to bring that down over time. And just to give you an example as well, of how broad match can work really well is, we're dealing with a campaign here, for example, that's a plumbing campaign that's been running for years. And because that campaign, for example, has over 500 conversions in total since it started running, it's been able to get a lot more conversions now using broad match keywords because Google's AI has so much context as to, what a lead actually looks like inside this campaign, that it's simply not just going to waste all of our budget on irrelevant clicks by having broad match keywords in place. and can get us a lot of conversions with a very low cost per conversion as well, like you can see here, for example. But just to give you context, on a campaign, for example, that we would not add in any broad match keywords yet for, this is an example of a landscaping company that we only started running 1 month ago that only has about 30 leads so far. And although we have gotten to a point already where we switch from maximize clicks to maximize conversions with a target CPA, we still haven't got enough conversion data to, have full faith that broad match keywords would perform well if we added them in. So we're still only using exact match keywords for now, for example, inside this campaign. So what I'd really just recommend with broad match keywords is to only implement them, for example, one per ad group. Once your campaign is at a point that it has a lot of conversion data, you have a clear target CPA in place, and you're just looking to scale what you already have. What I'd also recommend doing as well in advance is, if you are getting to the point where you want to add some broad match keywords to your campaign, is make sure that you have an extensive negative keyword list added in advance, because you'll notice inside your search terms report that if you don't have an extensive negative keyword list, you're going to be getting a lot of informational DIY related searches, cost or price related searches, and just a lot of searches in general that are not relevant to the service that you're offering. So the more of an extensive negative keyword list that you can add in advance with broad match negatives, meaning that you don't want to appear for searches that even mention any of these words, then the less irrelevant search terms that you're going to have to go through. And what you want to do a lot of, especially at the beginning, once you add some broad match keywords to your campaign, is spend more time in your search terms report than you would have before, because you might notice that you're getting a lot more relevant search terms appearing here than you would have before, especially if you were using mostly exact match keywords, for example. And why this is so important as well is that it'll give you a good insight as to what negatives you haven't added in advance already. And if you notice that you're appearing for a lot of competitor names, for example, then you might need to go through, and make a more extensive list of competitors that you need to add as negatives, or any informational based searches that say, how to, what is, things like that. Then, that gives you a good indication as well as to, what kind of negatives you need to be adding. And it'll just save you a lot of wasted clicks as well, especially if you're not checking the search terms report regularly. And part of the reason as well why broad match can be so effective in scaling campaigns once they get to a certain point is that, as you can see from this screenshot here, that broad match does utilize signals that phrase and exact match keywords don't use. For example, the content on your landing pages, other keywords in your ad group, which is why it's important as well to make sure you have a lot of other relevant keywords in your ad group for context, as well as previous searches that people are searching for on Google and their location as well. So it can be a good way for Google to show your ads to new leads that wouldn't have seen your ads otherwise. But I would still say that broad match keywords should not be added early on inside the campaign, because even though it utilizes all these unique signals, and that's probably why Google is pushing you so hard to use broad match keywords, is that they don't work well early on when you don't have a lot of conversion data, and especially when you're not using smart bidding, for example, because if you're at the beginning and still using maximize clicks, then it's not the time to use broad match keywords, because you'll get a crazy amount of clicks from your broad match keywords. But if you're getting all these clicks from irrelevant search terms, you're going to have a very low conversion rate to show for it. So I'd only recommend implementing broad match once you get to a point where you have a lot of conversion data and you're using smart bidding. And just as a reminder as well, you don't always want to follow all the recommendations that Google gives, especially about adding broad match keywords, as most of the recommendations are designed to make Google more money, and you can get plenty of reach by adding a broad match keyword to each ad group. Even if you're using a lot of phrase match keywords, you're going to get plenty of reach from those alone with how much more lenient Google's match types are getting. So don't follow, recommendations like this, for example, to use all broad match keywords for your campaigns, because even if you are ever adding broad match keywords to your campaigns, one per ad group is more than enough to get enough traffic. So I hope this video helped and gave you some more insight onto how Google Ads broad match keywords work, and also gave you a better understanding of when I should and shouldn't use broad match keywords for my own campaigns. Now, if you do have any questions at all about broad match keywords or anything else related to Google Ads in general, feel free to leave a comment down below. And if you are a service-based company looking for further help refining your own campaigns, feel free to have a look at the link in the description down below. And if you do like this Google Ads related content as well, feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as we'll be posting all things related to Google Ads here daily. and hopefully we'll see you in the next video.